I first started considering homeschooling when my oldest was in kindergarten in our local public school. I never in my life had any desire to homeschool, and my husband, who is a former public school teacher, he wasn't for homeschooling either. But school just wasn't working out for our son. He loved it, or at least he loved recess and PE, but as bright as he wasn't learning how to read or even his letters. And this after 2 years of preschool. So, after several months in kindergarten, his teacher expressed some concern and informed us that we needed to help him at home. Well, of course we wanted to help him, and we'd always planned to, but we just didn't know how. Well, I knew that his teacher was very good. I had no idea how my son was being taught in school. And I had a toddler and a baby at home, so figuring out how to help him felt so overwhelming. I did what I could. I started looking for help online about how to help kids learn their letters. And I purchased a phonics program because even as little as I knew, it looked like phonics wasn't happening in my son's school, and that didn't make sense to me. After picking him up from school every day and giving him a little break and a little snack, my son and I sat down together and worked through that phonics program. By the end of the school year, he was all caught up and his teacher was amazed by his progress. We were so relieved, and I could tell just a couple of months into the process that it was working out, but it wasn't an ideal situation. Getting started on a phonics lesson in the later afternoon after my son was tired from being at school all day and I was tired from taking care of his brothers wasn't ideal. So I thought, why don't I just keep him home and teach him myself? It would be less exhausting for everyone. Why send him to a school when I felt like the important learning was happening at home anyway? So I started researching homeschooling. At the time, I had a nursing baby and was really just too tired to do a lot of reading on the subject, but I found out that there were a lot of homeschoolers on YouTube. So every time I sat down to nurse, I pulled up the YouTube app on our TV and watched videos about homeschooling. And I started getting really excited about the idea. My husband was not on board yet until I started watching videos by one particular homeschooler who's very organized and orderly in her homeschooling, which really spoke to my soul. I knew that's how I would want to do things. My husband walked through the living room once as I was watching one of those videos, and he said he was okay with homeschooling if I did it like that. Isn't that how it is when you're trying something new, something that's a little scary? We look for someone that's done it successfully and we try to do it like that. Well, I 100% agree with my husband, so when we started homeschooling that next school year, I did adopt a lot of the methods used by my favorite homeschool YouTuber. Of course, I'm not a child, so I had enough common sense to suspect that I wouldn't get the same results from copying her because my family was different than hers. We would have to figure out what worked for us. And that's what we've done over the years. It has been a process of trial and error, of trying different things that I've seen other homeschoolers do. Sometimes I recognize right away that the way another family does things isn't going to work for us. Sometimes it takes a little while, and in a couple of different areas, it has taken me years to let go of a thing that works great for another family, but just doesn't work for us. I'd like to help you get through that process a little faster than it's taken me. I'm Leslie Maddox, an engineer turned homeschool mom, and I want to help you customize your homeschool so that it's a true reflection of your family's values, interests, and personalities, and not just a poor imitation of someone else's homeschool. In previous videos, we've used my homeschool planning decoder method of planning and organizing your homeschool to define your family's needs so that you can take a data-driven approach to creating a customized homeschool. We are now going to use the information you've gained about your family to explore your homeschooling options and narrow down those options to those most suited to your family. We'll start off by exploring homeschool styles. A homeschool style is basically an approach to homeschooling. You can think of it as an educational philosophy. A lot of homeschoolers are pretty attached to their chosen homeschool style, including me. And adopters of a particular homeschool style have a lot of justification for why their chosen homeschool style is the best way to educate kids. You'll even find curricula described as fitting into a particular homeschool style or educational philosophy. So in this video, I'll give you a very brief 1,000-foot view of 9 different homeschool styles and my opinion of the learning preferences that are best suited to each homeschool style. If you haven't watched a video on learning preferences, you'll want to do that first and then come back to this one. At the end of this video, I'll share what homeschool style I recommend you try out. While I hope that this information is useful to you, please filter it through your own insight and knowledge about your family. And just so you know, the Homeschool Plan Decoded Starter Kit, it does contain a homeschool styles info page, a cheat sheet, that gives you a description of these popular styles of homeschooling. You can find a link to the starter kit below. Let's get started with a homeschool style that some people don't consider to be homeschooling at all: school at home. School at home uses traditional grade-leveled curriculum packages with textbooks and workbooks, or online distance learning. Due to the use of textbooks and workbooks, an entirely school-at-home approach would work best for a student that does well with the written word and spoken word learning methods. If you give the instruction, a student that enjoys one-on-one teaching would benefit from it. When it comes to a distance learning option, that will work best for a student that does well working independently, unless you're planning to sit and watch every video with your child. Another popular homeschool style or educational philosophy is a classical education. You may even know of a private school that considers itself to be a classical school. A classical education focuses on the three stages of the trivium: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. The trivium is a theory that children progress through those three learning stages as they mature. The grammar stage focuses on memorizing facts. The logic stage focuses on analyzing and organizing the facts that have been learned. And the rhetoric stage focuses on forming and sharing conclusions. A classical education may include learning Greek and Latin, and there's a focus on the classics for literature. My observation is that there's an assumption in classical education that young children can easily memorize a large amount of information. As kids mature, there's an emphasis on discussion and debate. For these reasons, it seems that a classical education will work best for children that learn well with the written word and spoken word learning methods. Next up is Charlotte Mason. You'll hear a lot about Charlotte Mason as a homeschooler. The Charlotte Mason philosophy of education is based on the teachings of a 19th century educator named, wait for it, Charlotte Mason. Shocking, I know. This style of homeschooling recommends short study periods, about 15 to 20 minutes for elementary students. There's a focus on nature via nature walks and nature journals, and it incorporates observation, memorization, narration, and reading living books. Living books is a term used for books written by a single author that is passionate about the topic. The writing is more casual and conversational than typical textbooks. Since the Charlotte Mason method of homeschooling is more flexible than, say, classical method, it could work with any learning method depending on how you go about things. As far as social needs go, it'll probably work best for students that work well independently or one-on-one. You've probably already heard of a Montessori education since there seems to be so many schools and daycares that use it. The Montessori style of homeschooling incorporates long periods of unstructured time to allow students to choose what they want to do and learn by playing with tools and toys. It focuses on hands-on, self-directed learning. The function of the teacher is to guide, not teach directly. Based on that description, you can probably guess that I would recommend this style of homeschooling for students that do well with physical, interactive, and visual learning methods, and for kids that learn well independently. As you research homeschooling, you'll hear a lot about literature-based homeschooling. With this homeschool style, you would use living books rather than textbooks to teach. A literature-based homeschooler would probably use the word textbook as a curse word, which always confused me because I loved textbooks as a kid. They seem to hold so much promise to me. Well, anyway, with the emphasis on reading, a literature-based homeschool is most suited to a child that does well with learning from the written word and maybe the spoken word if you read everything to your kid. But I'll warn you, that's a lot of reading out loud. One homeschool style you may not have heard about is a Waldorf education. A Waldorf education focuses on engaging the head, heart, and hands. So that's connecting thinking, feeling, and doing, which leads us to a lot of hands-on experiential activities. Due to the experiential focus of a Waldorf education, I would say that it's best suited to students that do well with the interactive learning method, but also spoken word and visual. And since there's a lot of instruction, it might not be the best choice for kids that love to learn independently. Now let's take a moment to talk about unit studies. Unit studies are often used in other homeschool styles and incorporate different subject areas into a theme or a project. So a unit study could be theme-based, like studying farms and incorporating science, math, and language arts into that study of farms, or a unit study could be a project, like planting and caring for a garden, still incorporating science, math, and language arts into that project. Since this is an extremely flexible way of learning, it could work for any learning method or social need. If you create your own unit study, which is a lot of work by the way, you can cater it to your students' preferred learning methods. If you purchase a unit study, you would be wise to evaluate the learning methods used by the unit study creator to see if it would work for your family or if you can make it work for your family. Unschooling is a controversial homeschool style due to its name. With unschooling, students still need instruction in learning basic skills like reading, writing, and math, but then the student gets to choose areas of study and activity. There's an emphasis on projects and experiences. Since the student gets to choose a lot of what they learn and how they learn it, unschooling would work with any learning method, but it's best for students that learn very well independently. I think the idea here is that if a child gets to choose what they're learning, they'll automatically be motivated to learn independently, but I suspect that that's not always the case. The last homeschool style I'll mention is eclectic. The eclectic style of homeschooling doesn't adhere to one homeschool style and instead borrows from many. In my mind, it's the anti-homeschool style because it doesn't buy into the idea of any one style being the right way to homeschool. Therefore, it could work for any learning preferences if the homeschool parent borrows from other homeschool styles based on the child's needs and not the parent's own preferences. Now that we've touched on 9 popular homeschool styles, which one do I recommend you use? Well, the first question we should ask ourselves is there one philosophy of education that's the right one? In other words, does a homeschool style or educational philosophy have inherent value because it works for everyone all the time? My answer to this is no. I don't believe that there is any educational philosophy that always works. I don't even believe that there is one way of learning that always works for an individual. I've seen in my own life that different approaches to learning have been effective depending on my age and circumstances. The idea that one educational philosophy or homeschool style would always work for an entire family is ludicrous to me, completely unreasonable. And I think that it's dangerous to go all in on any one homeschool style because I believe that a homeschool style's value lies 100% in how it helps educate your children. And if you go all in on a homeschool style that is not a great fit for one or more of your kids, what does that do to your relationship with those children, to how you see them? Will you try to make your child conform to your chosen homeschool style, to adopt your interests and preferences? If your answer to those questions is yes, there are some YouTube channels that I can recommend to you that teach about narcissism. You might want to take a look at those. So what homeschool style would I recommend? I recommend you stick to eclectic homeschooling if and only if you borrow from whatever styles make sense for your children. Not if it's an excuse to create the homeschool that you think you would have enjoyed as a child. Your children are not you. They are their own wonderful selves. Honor and respect that. Do you wish that you could have spent your childhood reading and are mystified that your child hates reading and doesn't appreciate your efforts to give them plenty of books and time to read? Do you wish that you could have played all the sports as a child and are shocked that your child doesn't recognize that you are doing a great thing for them by putting them into every sport? Don't be mystified. Don't be shocked. Your children are not your clones and are allowed to not have the same interests and hobbies as you. There's a fine line between having a vision for our children's childhoods based on our knowledge, wisdom, and life experience, and expecting our kids to love and appreciate what we want them to love and appreciate. Look for that line and try not to cross it. But if you do, run back across the line as quickly as possible and apologize along the way. And structure a homeschool that fits your family as a whole and your children individually, whether or not adherence to a particular homeschool style or even the child version of yourself would approve. In the next Homeschool Plan Decoded video, we'll talk about different instruction options that you can take advantage of as a homeschooler, including ways that you can outsource some of the teaching. And remember that you can access all of the videos that walk you through the steps of the Homeschool Plan Decoded method of customizing your homeschool right now at the link below. And happy planning!